So today we're going to be talking about piracy and the kind of like the sides of piracy for today. A little quick question before we start here today. How many of you guys have looked up for free movies or like gotten free games, maybe books even? You know, just raise of hands, show of hands here. Yes, the majority of you guys. And most of us wouldn't consider that piracy because it's quote unquote free. But honestly, a lot of people kind of fall between the fine line of piracy, and they kind of have this stereotype over what it means to be a pirate. If you don't know what piracy is when you kind of steal media or like download illegal things online and without having to pay for it. My main claim is that piracy isn't always okay. It's not always wrong either. You shouldn't assume the worst of somebody because they pirate. Today we're going to be looking at where the stereotype comes from about piracy, why people pirate in the first place, and the different perspectives on piracy. My main commonplace is nothing in life is truly free. Most people think of this because from a young age we're kind of taught that stealing is really like morally bad, and I agree with that. It's usually morally bad, but there is sometimes background to why they do things like this, especially when it comes to piracy. Usually the saying nothing in life is truly free is true because when it comes to piracy, when you're downloading or stealing books online, you're not paying the artist directly and they won't get their commission from this, and you're kind of in a way not like giving them support for the types of media you love. And it's really a big double-edged sword because you tend to ignore the factor of supporting the artist but getting access to culture. Let's look at some examples of what piracy would be like, why piracy would be bad. A small indie artist not getting their kind of pirating from a small indie artist and kind of stealing their album, that would be necessarily bad. But accessing a banned book would or like medias in like different countries, sometimes they're banned. So being able to pirate that gives you access to culture. So it's not necessarily morally bad. With informs.com, it says access is the main issue. When you restrict access to paid video streaming services, the demand for piracy tends to skyrocket. And then with Washington University, it says the introduction to Netflix led to piracy, which shows us that access kind of leads to less piracy. It's like kind of connects back to the other topic where it talks about how restricting access to something will lead to more piracy. Like the less access and more available it is, the more it's likely for people to go and actually go out of their way and pirate things like this. It says another source indicates that when the legal supply of content is affordable, the increased customer demand skyrockets, and under specific conditions, it tends to make people abandon piracy because it's available and it's affordable. And this kind of leads us into my transformed commonplace, the idea that fair access with fair compensation. The main idea is that if you can support an artist and you can support creators, it's best that you do so in your best interest. And if you can, there should be kind of a way for people to access this culture and have like a pathway to support their favorite artists. Again, both values hold. You know, people who want to pirate because they want to access culture, and people's ideas that pirating is bad. It's not, again, as I said, there's a fine line, and it's not all necessarily bad. You know, and we kind of want that stereotype to change. Let's look at some visualization, like what would happen if people's perspectives on piracy change. You know, people would come to understand the premise of context behind why people pirate. There would be better pricing, and people would have more access to things like banned books and then things online that are mainly restricted. And again, there would be more access to these kind of medias. If it leads to no change, people will stay kind of in the dark. They won't be able to access this culture, and there will be this constant cycle like fighting over who's right and who's wrong, when it should really be more about focusing on who's getting this content and why they're accessing it. An overall summary here is, research shows that when there's barriers, people tend to pirate, and it's hard to kind of distinguish between people who pirate media and like they want to steal it. There's a really like hard way to distinguish these two groups because they're kind of mixed in. And again, my main claim is don't assume the worst in people because they pirate, and there's again fair compensation, and both. And my kind of final statement here is kind of look between the fine lines and try to distinguish and ask why in the first place. And just kind of don't judge a pirate, kind of ask why they set sail in the first place. So that's my speech. Thank you.